Hey, what's up? My name is Tackless, and today we're doing a requested tutorial on a autonomous projectile that when it's fired, it will fly into the air, target an enemy, and fire upon them. Now, I suppose that what I'm doing, you could change so it targets multiple enemies at once, but I'm just looking at one enemy at a time, and it has a pretty short lifespan, but you can always increase it. If you're not quite sure what I'm getting at, just kind of imagine like the Vulture from Call of Duty Ghosts, if you play that. It's like that. It's not as powerful. It's not as perfect. But it's something like that. So, I'm going to show you what it's like. So, as you can see, we've got our enemy here. So, I can throw my projectile up in the air. It flies up. Rains death and destruction, and then it will follow me around for a little while. Not long, though. It has a pretty short life. And then, poof, it's gone. Now, there are a couple of weird issues in the world I'm playing with that have developed since the Hippo update, mostly involving sound and effects. So I'll show you how to do it right with the sound and effects, but they may not necessarily display well in my tutorial. So, and we have my boss here from earlier videos. Make short business of them. This little drone also pulls aggro, because when you have it targeting a team, it has to have its own team, and that means it draws aggro. Those guys all want to kill it, but they can't reach it because it flew up in the air. So, I hope that's enough of a demonstration. Let's get into it. First off, to create the model, I used a leather ball and a windmill fan, both of which are free models. The windmill fan itself, I attached to the top and made it roll at speed 20. That way it looks nice and quick, like a propeller blade. And I also made it non-collidable by going into Properties, Physics, Collidable Off. The ball itself, it is collidable, but it's also a character, not tumbling. This way it stays upright and it doesn't flail around. So, this isn't super complicated. There's a couple of things I added just for the sake of adding them, but you don't need to if you don't want to. So let's get into it. First, we need to assign it a team. And because their player is on team 1, it's going to be on team 1. So team equals team 1. Next, excuse me, we're going to give it its targeting system. So for its targeting system, it's going to be looking for enemies. So when detect enemies, we're now going to assign an object variable called, let's do drone target. I swear, my stupid keyboard. Target. I think I'm just going to make really short names for these things in the future. Whatever. Target. Done. Drone target equals nearest object enemy. This means that this variable changes every time it detects enemies, new enemies. So, it will target the nearest enemy to it. But, just so you know, it won't always detect the nearest object to it constantly. It will detect the nearest object the first time it detects enemies. So if it detects a group and the one it first detected runs away a little bit within its detection radius, it will still track it rather than the new nearest enemy, if that makes sense. So when, oh no, not when. Let's see, we're going to do countdown timer 1.5. I'm going to get back to why it's 1.5 here in a minute. And then we're going to make a loop every 1 second, so that it has a 1 second cooldown between shots. Loop. Then, nope. Started to shoot. Let's see, what are we going to have it shoot? I like to have it shoot something that has a trail behind it, which is why I'm such a big fan of shooting these sparks. So I'm going to grab the red spark because it's cool looking. I'm going to have it shoot it at the target, drone target. at speed, and you want it quick enough that it will rarely miss, but slow enough you can still see the shot. 20, 30, 40, somewhere in that range. I don't know why I just skipped through a bunch of them. There we go, 30. And then with damage, I'm also going to put it 30. So, it will shoot a spark at the drone target with a high speed and pretty heavy damage every 1 second, after 1.5 seconds. Now, we have to give it its flight. So, for the duration of 1.5, this is its moving up into the air mode. It is going to... I don't even think I need a child line of code for this. I'm just too used to it. It's going to move, not turn, move. Come on. Move in direction. Now, because I want this to always move up, no matter what, no matter where it is, no matter if it gets knocked around or whatever, we're going to have it whirled up. Move in direction, whirled up with flying. And at speed, now we're going to make this really slow. Because if we don't, it'll just fly away. 1.5. This should get it nice and close to where we want it. So, this is the basic brain of it. It flies up in the air for 1.5 seconds without doing anything. Then after 1.5 seconds, every 1 second, it targets the nearest enemy. So, let's see. Now we're going to add how it becomes destroyed. So, the way that I structured its life, if it targets enemies for 6 straight seconds, it's destroyed. If it has targeted enemies, and then it stops targeting enemies, it gets another 6 seconds. If that makes sense. That way, if there was one enemy, and it kills it, and then you want to run over to another enemy, it still has time. But at 20 seconds, no matter what, it'll be destroyed. You can adjust these how you want. But when detect enemies, being lazy with some of the code and just copy and paste it. Child line of code, countdown timer 6, destroy with effect. Let's do poof, because poof is always good. Where's poof at? Poof, 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 poof. I think I skipped. Yep, there's poof. That had a bunch of new effects in it. It's nice, but it's also a little bit tricky to find where the old ones are. Now I'm just going to copy and paste this, and I'm going to put no longer. It's specific that it has to be no longer and not, because no longer means that it used to be targeting enemies, but it is no longer targeting enemies. Not means that it just hasn't ever. So when no longer targeting enemies, countdown timer 6 seconds. If you aren't understanding what I'm doing here, I think I've tried to explain it. I don't know if I did a good job or not. It has 6 seconds while it's targeting enemies to kill things. If it's at 5.5 seconds and it killed the last enemy, then it is no longer detecting enemies, and it stops this countdown timer and begins this countdown timer, and it gets another 6 seconds. Theoretically, if you kept detecting and not detecting, it would have a maximum life. And the maximum life, I'm just going to copy paste one of these again. Maximum life is 20 seconds. No matter what you do, no many times it detects or undetects, it's dead in 20 seconds. So, this is how you can make a pretty good standalone drone. Now we're going to add the fluff to it to make it a little more fun. First, I'm going to make it yaw slowly. This way it's slowly rotating mid-air, so it actually looks like it's moving and not just hovering perfectly in the air. When it is not detecting enemies, only one, we are going to have it move toward player. By the way, I'm going to do a tutorial on this point. The player tile, I'm becoming less and less fond of this thing for good reason, because the player tile is not the playable character. The player tile is any object in your world that you have programmed to accept commands from your controller or your keyboard. So I'll do a specific video on this in the future, but the player tile can be deceiving. So when move toward player with flying, and because 1.5 is excruciatingly slow, when it's not detecting enemies, it moves at speed 5. With strafing. That being said, it will move down towards the ground, and I don't want it to be just skidding along the ground. So what we're going to do to keep it off the ground is when bump terrain. Now, I would just directly program fly up above the ground here, but this only works while it's bumping the terrain. And as soon as it starts moving away from the terrain, it's no longer bumping the terrain, and it stops working. So we are going to create a new Boolean variable called bump terrain. Hey, look at that. My keyboard did good. Bump terrain equals true. When bump terrain equals true, that you don't need that line just yet. We're going to do almost exactly the same code as this. Move in direction world up. So I'm actually just going to copy and paste that line of code. Save me some time. And then countdown timer. Wow. Alright, that wasn't even close. Countdown timer 1. Bump terrain equals false. They moved some stuff around on me in this update. Not a bad thing. It's just going to take me a little bit to get used to. Now I'm going to bump this speed up just a fuzz because I'm giving it less time to move. So let's just take it right to 2. Giving it less speed to move, and it's a little bit harder to notice when it's flying around. So, you could add a creation sound. Like once when it's created, it makes like a mechanical clank or something like that. I'm not going to do that here. So, oh, and lastly, you need to go into it, go to the brain, and turn template on. Make it true. It will have defaulted to false, but make it true. And then we're going to go to our player. My player has such a big brain, it takes forever to load. Come on. And I'm going to delete this line of code. When I'm going to choose Y because it's one of the few unassigned keys I have. When Y pressed, started to combat. We're going to do throw. I think I said to the person who requested this that this couldn't be done with throw, but after thinking about it, yes, it can be done with throw, and that makes our lives easier because you don't have to worry about collidability so much. Throw leather ball. Let's see. Launch speed. This is the speed of which is thrown, and because we don't want it to be thrown, we want it to just fly away at speed 0. So that it just, if it wasn't going to fly away on its own, it would drop straight to the ground. And because this thing is so powerful, I don't want it to be spammable. So I'm going to put its launch frequency to 0.3, meaning once every 3-ish seconds, you can throw another one. Alright, so let's see if this works. If it doesn't, I will go back over it and see what I did wrong. So here's our goblin. Let's throw it. It flies up. Bang, bang. Haha. Flies right back to me. Now, it was targeting the corpse because that corpse was not recognized as dead the way this whole code works out. So it continued targeting it. But if it targets a new enemy, it's complicated. Just know that it'll keep targeting dead bodies after it's killed them. Sometimes. So, and if you notice, the sound in this world is messed up. I think there's something in the world that's making sound that's overlapping everyone else. But when we get a big group of them going, draws aggro, and it strikes death from above. And after 6 seconds, it disappears. Now, when it's targeting enemies, it will never return to the player unless all the enemies are killed. It's not like a pet, how it'll return to the player after the player gets so far away. This is a drone, strictly meant to do its purpose in place. So if it managed to kill all the enemies, then it would return to me. But it has a job to do. It's nice because it'll draw aggro, and that's actually probably one of its almost better functions in my opinion. So, and if I summon it here, it'll stay right with me. But if it bumps the terrain, it goes back up. See? Yeah, and it died there without any effect. So, I also know that thrown projectiles have a lifetime, which I didn't go over here. So, if you're having issues, be sure to turn that lifetime up all the way. So, let's go pester this Yeti. There we go. We got the Yeti. Now, it can be hit and it can die. At this point, it has 100 health, which is default, so it would take a long time. I would say maybe turn the health down to 10 or something so that it would take very little effort to knock it out of the sky, because that thing would be very fragile. So, I hope this is what you wanted, the person who requested this. Oh man, the tutorial ended up longer than I meant it to. You don't need to do everything I told you to do. If you don't want it to follow the player around, then you can ignore some of the steps of my tutorial. And I know I kind of went over some of the details of this thing. Unimportant details. But, yeah, in my book, the more you understand how the code thinks, the better you can understand how to make it work for you. So, I hope this was helpful. Thank you guys for watching. Something I want to throw in there. I am 85-ish subscribers right now. 83, 84, 85, somewhere there. When I get to 100, I'm going to release something cool. I'm not going to tell you what, but I'm going to release something cool.